Hello, my name is Jessie. I'm an American accent coach, and I'm going to be listening to a message from one of my paid patrons. So let's listen to the message.
Hi, Jessie. Throughout my entire life, I've always wanted to speak in English fluently. But because of the way English is taught in schools, I've always struggled with my spoken English. I couldn't learn to speak fluent English for 5 years. Please, can you help me improve my English? Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Liz, for your question. And I'll be giving you some advice, and then we will be practicing some of the things that you said, but I will be saying it with an American accent, and I will allow you to repeat after me. So just a quick message and disclaimer, when I work with students, I am constantly assessing them. And it's really hard to assess someone's English based on a short little voice message. So please know that I am giving my impression on this message after only listening to it a few times. So I may not hear everything that I normally would when I see someone on a regular basis. But what are my recommendations? First off, I would like to say that there are two different things that we usually work on when we want to sound more like a native speaker. Number one, we look at English mistakes. So yes, English speakers make grammatical mistakes. So there's obvious grammatical mistakes that English learners make, and then there's other ones that native speakers make. I personally look at and work on mistakes that are obvious. For the English mistakes, in order to fix them, you will have to get constant feedback and correction so that you can correct yourself. So when I work with students, for example, when I have like one-on-one conversation sessions, I will always be listening for mistakes. And usually they're the same types of mistakes that come again and again. So usually the first time I bring it up and I show the student a mistake, they may not know what it is. But the more that we visit the same mistake, the more that they're going to be able to identify it, and then they will eventually start to self-correct. So this is something that could be a good idea to start working on if you want to make less obvious mistakes in English. A way to do this could obviously be to see someone like an English coach that can correct your mistakes and will give you feedback. That could be more expensive, especially if you're paying by the hour. So what I personally would do if I was in your shoes is to download an app like the language app that I've mentioned in previous videos, such as langotalk, and you can talk to these AI bots, these AI language partners. And if you turn on the feedback function, every time that you make a mistake, it will correct you. So you'll get that constant feedback. Oh, I said it like this, it should be said like that. And then as you keep on getting corrected, you start to realize, like internally, you'll start to realize, okay, that's not the correct way to say it. So that's if you want to fix the English mistakes that you make. Next, if we want to work on pronunciation, what I normally look for when I am with students is patterns. So these are very obvious when an English learner is starting to learn English, and I'll actually show you a little graph. So this is my personal experience with students. If you are an accent coach, please let me know if you agree or disagree or how you explain this to your students. But let's say this graph represents time and energy and how, as you improve your English, and this represents your accent. So this would mean that your accent sounds really like your native language. Sounds like your native language. So for example, if Spanish is your first language, you might be pronouncing the J sound, j, 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 as the Y sound, or vice versa, or you might mix them, or the B, 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 B sound, b, as a v, V sound. And it's really obvious here, right? There's these constant patterns. Whereas up here means that you have like a perfect American accent. So in the beginning here, you will be able to see really obvious patterns that as you fix them, and you just fix one or two or three, boom, your accent is going to improve dramatically. But then as you get here, these patterns, sometimes they're not as obvious, or they just start to be certain words, like high frequency words. And then you'll see that your progress will get slower and slower. So Liz, I feel like you're past that really obvious stage where I only have a small 23-second clip, but I feel like it's hard for me to hear a lot of patterns. Maybe if the voice message was longer, I'd be able to hear, but I'm not hearing a lot of obvious patterns at this moment, except I could be wrong. Again, it's a very short message, but I feel like something you can work on if you wanted to focus on sounds would be, I notice when you say English, you say, it sounds like you're saying English, like eat, it, right? Right, like the E and eat and then and it. I feel like you're saying the E, English, right? It should be English. That's what I think I hear. But I don't think I hear it in the other words. Like, I feel like you have worked on this sound. Another thing is consonant clusters. I will talk about it a little bit later when I share my screen, but very often, Spanish speakers, when there are multiple consonants together, very often they're not all pronounced like they should. So for example, Latinos in Canada, instead of saying McDonald's, Donald's, you might hear McDonald, Donald, al, like there's no alt, LGS, right? Or another example, instead of saying Donald Trump, I'll hear Donald Trump, like Donald Trump, like instead of Trump. So that's a consonant cluster, right? I'll share with you what I mean once I share my screen. And then another way, because I hear it's in random words that I'll hear, okay, that was hard to understand, just random words. And when I get Microsoft Word to write down what you were saying, so it's listening and dictating, it will misunderstand you. And I tried this also with Google Translate. So if you speak to Google Translate and it does not correctly write what you said, then that gives you instant feedback, and that's a way of testing your pronunciation for free. So I don't know if you live in a place where you speak English. If you do, you can get feedback just by speaking with people. You'll kind of start to see that they don't understand certain words, right? And then that will give you feedback to like social feedback that, oh, people do not understand when I say this word. But if you don't live in an English speaking place, test your pronunciation with Google Translate. You speak to it, it should write and transcribe what you say. You can also use the app that I mentioned where it gives you feedback right away. And it should, I believe the program might use Google Translate to transcribe, but I'm not sure. But either way, it will transcribe what it understands. If it understands you correctly, you'll see it transcribe. I'm hoping that helps. Another thing I'll say is that when you target a sound or an aspect, let's say you target consonant clusters, you want to make sure that you are pronouncing each consonant sound, unless it doesn't need to be pronounced in connected speech, because there are always exceptions, which I know English is difficult. But something that I always say is when you're working on a sound, right? Like I think I previously mentioned in this video, you want to look at what your accent is now and what accent you want, which is the American accent. Like what is not similar. So you pick different sounds, you work on it so that you could perfect it to get the American accent. When you pick a sound, which you might choose consonant clusters, or if there's like certain kind of words that you mispronounce, you will try to target those specific sounds or aspects every day by daily practice. It could be 5 minutes a day. It could be 10, 15 minutes a day. It doesn't have to be a long time. So when you are targeting a sound or an aspect, the first step is to learn to identify it. Are you able to hear the difference between the correct way of pronouncing it and the incorrect way? Then you can learn how to produce it and then make it a habit. Once you've mastered that sound, like isolated, maybe in a sentence, start to make it a habit in your day-to-day English. And then really important, which you'll use in this step right here, is to get feedback. So if you are, for example, trying to improve how to say English or the sound, test yourself. Ask native speakers, your English coach, your English teacher, whatever. Make sure that you are getting feedback and that you actually are pronouncing it correctly, because when you start to target it daily and practice daily, you're making it a habit, whether it be a good habit and it's the correct pronunciation, or it is an incorrect habit and you are forming a habit of pronouncing it incorrectly. So always get feedback on your journey. You know, am I pronouncing it correctly? Good. I'll continue practicing it. Is this correct? Yes. Okay. If not, I'll change it. And then of course, once you've mastered that sound and it becomes a regular habit in your daily speech, your spoken English, then you will target a new sound. But like I mentioned, with the short clip that I got, it's hard for me me to hear which patterns or incorrect patterns, pronunciation patterns you have. So I'm going to be opening up my Word document and sharing with you what I see. So now let's look at this together, sentence by sentence. I'm going to listen to it one more time, let you know what I misheard or what maybe didn't sound correct. And then I'm going to say it and allow you to repeat. So whether or not you are this person, whether or not you are Liz, feel free to repeat after me.
Hi, Jessie. Throughout my entire life, I've always wanted to speak in English fluently.
So right here, wanted to speak in English. I think that's what she said, and that's what my program understood. So I'm going to get rid of the in. I'm going to make this bigger too. So throughout my entire life, this is not like it's not needed, but you don't need to pronounce the T. You can. It's not incorrect, but you'll notice that English speakers often will not pronounce the T in this circumstance because it's followed by M. So throughout my entire life, putting my hand out, throughout my entire life, I've always wanted, so boop, I'm going to get rid of the T here, wanted. Remember, it's id, and she did that correctly. Wanted to, and the two is going to turn into a ta, okay, ta sound. Unstressed. I've always wanted to speak English fluently. I've always wanted to speak English fluently. And you'll notice that the T isn't pronounced fluently. You can pronounce it, but very often, because it's three consonants together. Like I said, it's funny I said that Spanish speakers often struggle with not pronouncing every consonant, but there are exceptions. That's why I'm like, oh, there's always exceptions. English is not easy. So you could say fluently, pronouncing all the consonants in careful speech, but because there are three consonants together in this word, the middle one can disappear in fast speech, right? So when native speakers speak, if it's not super careful, you'll hear fluently. So throughout my entire life, I've always wanted to speak English fluently. Throughout my entire life, I've always wanted to speak English fluently. To speak English fluently. To speak English, not English. No. English. 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 English fluently. To speak English fluently. Good job. Okay, so I'm hoping that helps. And of course, this was done perfectly. But for those who struggle with the teach, remember your tongue is between your teeth for throughout. Throughout. Now I'm going to clear this. Boom, boom, boom. Let's clear this and let's scroll down and listen to this. Okay, before I say anything, listen to the word studied and listen to the word struggled. When I say that some words are not easy to understand unless you're concentrating.
But because of the way English is taught in schools, I've always struggled with my spoken English. I couldn't learn to speak.
And this, what word and what Google Translate understood was the way English is started. It understood started. Started. It should be studied. 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 But it should be studied. Studied. English is studied in schools. Studied in schools. And you don't have to put the S for schools. You can, but you can say in school, like in general. So I'm going to go through this. Oh, before I go through it, this word here, struggled. I don't know what you understood, but my Word document and Google Translate, when I put the mic to it, understood traveled. Traveled. Because I think the G was not really pronounced like it should be, because we have the G, G, and the L, and the G, right? So we have the consonant clusters there. We need to pronounce those sounds. So let's go through it quickly. Don't put an E in front of it, but I know Spanish speakers often will put an E in front of S. Like it's not as struggled, it is struggled. So gold, g-l-d, struggled, struggled. So let's go to studied, struggled. So struggled with my spoken English. Struggled with my spoken English. And then, but, you could say because, but usually we will reduce it and it will sound like because. Because. So I'm going to put a little because, if that helps you guys. But because of the way English is studied in schools, the way English, way, and I'll actually put this here too. The Y, when it's connected, it will kind of go into English. So the way English. But because of the way English is studied, okay, so we have an S and an S here, so it kind of goes together, is studied. But because of the way English is studied, put it together, but because of the way English is studied in schools, I've always struggled with my spoken English. And I know the O can be pronounced as many different things, different ways of being pronounced. In this word, it is O, spoken. I think I heard spoken, like but it's spoken. And Liz, check out my Patreon, the section where you can get your language guide. I don't have my language guides ready for most of the languages, but I do have Spanish. So check it out. O is problematic for Spanish speakers because it can be pronounced in many different ways in English. So spoken English, spoken English. Remember the N. It's a consonant, it's followed by a vowel in the next word, so it's almost like spoken English. Spoken English. Ooh, like one word. My spoken English. Spoken English. English. I've always struggled with my spoken English. So, but because of the way English is studied in schools, I've always struggled with my spoken English. I've always struggled with my spoken English. Okay. And when I mention using Google Translate to improve your pronunciation to get feedback, the two words that made me think, oh, this would be really beneficial for Liz is because the word studied and struggled was not easily understood by Google Translate and probably isn't easily understood by a lot of English speakers, which is fine. It's a part of improving your English, but getting that feedback is going to help you improve your pronunciation. And what you can even do is you can ask ChatGPT. Let's do it right now. And what you can do is that you can even ask ChatGPT to think of words or give you words with consonant clusters. So I'm going to do this prompt here and say Spanish speakers, or you can even ask, I already know the answer, do Spanish speakers struggle with pronouncing consonant clusters? And they're going to say yes. Yes, absolutely. Because like I said, we're in Spanish. And I'm going to ask, can you give me a list of words with consonant clusters? Please include words, high frequency words. High frequency words are words that you will see very often in spoken English. High frequency. And don't judge me if I have typos because I'm an accent coach, not a grammar teacher. Please include high frequency words. There we go. So this could be a good way for you to practice daily if you wanted to practice daily. And there you can see it's creating consonant clusters that are in the beginning of the word, in the middle of the word, at the end of the word. I could be wrong, but I feel like at the end of the word and in the middle of the word is can be very problematic for Spanish speakers. I'm sure I have to listen to my Spanish clients for the beginning, but I really notice the ones at the end. So here we go. I'll give you a link, Liz, to this chat so you can try it out for yourself. And if you ever want us to work on consonant clusters in a group Patreon chat, let me know. I'll let this finish off and then I'll give it to you after. So we have this, all that kind of fun stuff. All right, so next.
Always struggled with my spoken English. I couldn't learn to speak fluent English for 5 years.
So I couldn't learn to speak English fluently for 5 years. I couldn't learn, and you'll notice that the T will often disappear here. So I couldn't learn to speak English. So remember, to turns into a ta in connected speech if it's in the middle of a sentence, usually. So I couldn't learn to speak English fluently. Again, you could pronounce it fluently, but I'm going to say fluently because we have the N and the L. Fluently instead of for in connected speech, we actually say fur. Rhymes with her, okay? Unstressed. So for 5 years. So we have 5, pronounce the V, y, 5 years. For 5 years. I couldn't learn to speak English fluently for 5 years. I couldn't learn to speak English fluently for 5 years. Or you could say, I couldn't speak English fluently for 5 years. I'm actually going to write that down so you can see it and repeat after me. I couldn't speak English fluently for turns into fur in connected speech, 5 years. Let's say it. I couldn't speak English fluently for 5 years. I couldn't speak English fluently for 5 years. But I couldn't speak English fluently for 5 years. I am saying the sentence slightly different, a different kind of intonation and stress, just so that you can feel the different ways of saying it. So if I wanted to really put emphasis on 5 years, like it's been a long time, I'd say, I couldn't speak English fluently for 5 years. For 5 years. For 5 whole years. So that's a way of saying, like, it's been so long. So if you repeat after me, you can feel what it feels like to dramatically share that you have been studying for so long. Okay. All right. So let's go to the next one. So please, can you help me improve my English? So English, please. Can you help me improve my English? Thanks a lot. So just to sum this up, I would say work on those English mistakes just to perfect your English. You can do that with an app such as langotalk, which is down in the description below. Turn on the feedback function so you can get that feedback and start to correct yourself. Test your pronunciation with Google because there are certain words that are sometimes difficult to understand. And I think they're basically words with consonant clusters. So that might be the pattern that you want to focus on, the sounds and pronunciation patterns that you want to correct in your English. So I'm hoping that's helpful for anyone who wants to join my Patreon as a paid patron and allow me to continue making videos on YouTube. The link to join my membership is down below. So one thing I forgot to mention is I often have like step 1 and step 2 when it comes to improving your pronunciation. And I feel like it's important to cover step 1 before you move to step 2 or have most of step 1 mastered. And I'd say step 1 is usually to perfect the sounds that sound incorrect when you're speaking English. And then the second step would be to start working on the rules of connected speech to sound more like a native speaker. Just because sometimes by going to step 2 too quickly, sometimes we can start to develop the incorrect pronunciation of certain sounds. So for Liz, she might be at the step where she can learn the exceptions. For example, when to drop the T, when to not pronounce the T or the D. without it interfering with her pronunciation, like without her pronunciation getting worse. But we can definitely discuss that together, Liz, in the next live or Zoom that we have. Because I'll give you an example for those watching. Sometimes when I'm working with a Spanish speaker that struggles with the E and the J sound, so instead of saying yes, they'll say Jess, or instead of saying Jess, which is my name, they'll say yes. Or instead of saying you, they'll say Jew, right? Which we have to correct that and make that enough of a habit before moving forward. Because later on, when we start practicing connected speech, you guys might know that when there's a D at the end of a word followed by Y, like for example, would, and then you, yeah, with a Y sound, it turns into would you, j. So it kind of goes against what we've already corrected with their pronunciation, and it could be more confusing, if that makes sense. So what I would say is if you are still struggling with mastering the main sounds of English, work on that first, and then work on the little like secrets of sounding like a native speaker, if that makes sense. So I'm going to leave it at that. If you want to practice your pronunciation and develop more of an American accent, click here, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.